If you watched my earlier video on the harvesting of the worm cocoons from that particular bin, you'll notice that I did remove quite an amount of small worms which eventually found their way into one of the worm pits I have. I did decide then to keep back a small amount of worms to put into another one of the Barking and Dagenham glass recycling bins which I got free off the council, because they take them out of use after a certain amount of time, and it's a good idea if you want to start a worm bin for little to no cost if you contact your local council and see if they do something similar. However, I set up this bin with cardboard and paper, dampened it down, and put an amount of worms in, probably about a pound or so, half a kilogram, and as you can see they've spread out very well and are composting the bedding. I've fed it twice in the last 3 weeks. This bin's about 3 weeks old. I've fed it twice, once a very small amount of food once they'd settled in, and last week I fed probably about half a kilo of food. As you can see, they've eaten all of it, and that's really important because one of the things you don't want to do with a very small bin is keep feeding it and feeding it to the point where the worms are just overwhelmed with the food and can't cope. It'll bring in lots of critters that you probably don't want in a small bin like this. Definitely it'll attract fruit flies, which you don't want, and you may get a condition in the worms called protein poisoning, where they become sort of bloated and die. So you want to make sure that the worms are actually eating all of the food that you're putting into the bin before you feed it again. Looking at this bin, you can see that they've spread themselves out quite well throughout the whole bin, which means the bin is in good condition for them and they're quite happy. Now this is a kilogram of food waste from our kitchen, mostly fruit scraps, and if you take a look at this is the juice that I squeezed out of it. So it was 1.5 kilos, and when I hand squeezed the fruit pieces that were left, the scraps that were left, I got about 0.5 kilogram of liquid out of these particular food scraps. That's one of the ways in which a small bin like this can become saturated with moisture, making it too wet for the worms, and you'll get pot worms more than you'd like. Pot worms are good in the bin, but not to the point where they overwhelm it. You may see a little bit of steam coming off this as I'm feeding it, and that's because I put this container in the microwave for about 2 minutes before feeding it to the bin, and that was to kill off any insect eggs or fruit flies that may be in that little pile of scraps before I put it into the bin. All I'm doing here now is just evenly spreading the scraps across the surface, and as you can see there's just a few seeds left which I don't really want in the bin, although there is some has gone in anyhow, and once they spread I'll just pick them out by hand. All I'm going to do now is cover that bin up to the top with shredded newspaper and cardboard. That will allow plenty of air into the bin for the worms, and as you can see from the sides, the worms aren't making any attempt whatsoever to leave the bin. If they were, they would leave trails of vermicompost up the sides, and as you can see the sides are quite clear. So I'll just cover it now to the surface with shredded newspaper, and I'll leave it for a week, and I'll update